Did you know that ABC executives seriously considered scrapping The Greatest American Hero after hearing the pitch? They believed audiences wouldn't accept a superhero who kept crashing into everything. That's right. The show we fondly remember for its bumbling yet endearing hero, neon red supersuit, and incredibly catchy theme song almost never made it to air. Luckily for us, it did. From the moment William Katt's Ralph Hinckley took flight and crashed spectacularly, a cult classic was born. Despite a relatively short run from 1981 to 1983, The Greatest American Hero carved out a unique place in pop culture. It stood out with its blend of comedy, heart, and old-fashioned heroism. Ready to find out more? Let's zoom into 30 behind-the-scenes secrets. 1. ABC almost rejected the project. Many fans don't realize this. ABC executives once considered rejecting The Greatest American Hero altogether. They were afraid audiences wouldn't like a superhero who kept crashing. He crashed into billboards. He crashed into trees. Sometimes he even crashed into the ground. At the time, TV shows were either serious crime dramas or silly cartoons. A clumsy but well-meaning hero seemed too offbeat. Some ABC executives thought the idea wouldn't work, but Stephen J. Cannell had a strong track record. A BC decided to give him a chance. He pitched a short pilot scene. In it, William Katt's character, Ralph Hinckley, tries to fly. He stumbles through his early flights. After every successful takeoff, he quickly loses control. The studio executives groaned, but test audiences laughed. They didn't just find it funny, they thought it was charming. Polished heroes never gave them that feeling. This early promise convinced ABC. The show got the green light. The lesson? Sometimes a hero's true power is this: he makes us smile at our own flaws. 2. Stephen J. Cannell successfully pitched the show. The series sprang to life under the guidance of Stephen J. Cannell. By that point, he had built a reputation for creating signature TV hits. His shows were full of adventure and humor. Think The A-Team. Think 21 Jump Street. But with The Greatest American Hero, Cannell wanted something different. He aimed for a lighter spirit. He wanted to play with standard superhero tropes. He saw creative potential in a unique storyline. It was about an average teacher, someone with a modest paycheck, someone with real, everyday worries. This teacher suddenly gets cosmic responsibility. He has no idea how to handle it. That idea felt fresh and funny, but Cannell saw more than just comedy. He believed the show could offer something deeper. Beneath the humor, it could explore everyday heroism. It could talk about civic duty. It could reflect the chaos of ordinary life. At a time when TV was full of gritty cop dramas, this show felt different. It was sincere. It was about an unassuming man just trying not to fall flat on his face. And that felt like a breath of fresh air. 3. William Katt was almost cast as Luke Skywalker. William Katt, who would later play Ralph Hinckley, nearly became Luke Skywalker. Decades before The Greatest American Hero, Katt auditioned for George Lucas's Star Wars. Mark Hamill eventually got the role. He put on the Jedi robes. But Katt's audition made an impression. Casting directors remembered him. Some of them later worked with Stephen J. Cannell. Cannell saw exactly what he needed in Katt. He wanted someone who could show sincerity and comedic awkwardness at the same time. Katt had both. He could be brave enough to face criminals. He could also be clumsy and boyish enough to make audiences laugh, especially when he tried to fly. That mix of heroism and humility was key to the show's success. Katt later joked about it. If he couldn't wield a lightsaber, at least he got to crash land in red spandex. 4. Theme song, Believe It or Not, was nearly cut. The instantly recognizable theme song, Believe It or Not, almost never made it to air. ABC executives thought it was too soft for a superhero series, but Cannell disagreed. He believed the breezy, upbeat melody would define the show, so he fought to keep it. Composer Mike Post created a classic earworm. Then Joey Scarberry's vocals took it even further. The song became a hit on the Billboard Hot 100. It eventually reached #2. Audiences loved its easy optimism. It matched Ralph's honest attempts to do good. The song was more than just a catchy intro. It became an anthem of comedic aspiration. Fans sang along with a smile. "Who could it be? Believe it or not, it's just me." There was always a touch of self-deprecating humor in those lyrics. Rarely does a song capture a show's entire spirit so perfectly. 5. The original title was The Greatest American Heroine. Initially, the show had a different title. It was called The Greatest American Heroine. Early brainstorming focused on a female lead. She would discover a supersuit without the instruction manual. But Cannell eventually changed the concept. He decided a male lead might work better with mainstream audiences. He imagined a down-on-his-luck teacher, someone who usually doesn't get the spotlight. There was also a comedic advantage. A regular guy in extraordinary situations could be very funny, especially when paired with a tough, no-nonsense FBI agent like Bill Maxwell. That contrast created strong comedic friction. The change shaped the show's entire dynamic. Still, the original idea wasn't forgotten. Years later, it came back in a pilot called The Greatest American Heroine. It was a sequel attempt, but it never became a full series. 6. Character name changed. Due to Reagan assassination attempt, the name Ralph Hinckley clashed tragically with real-world events. In 1981, John Hinckley Jr. tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan. Suddenly, the Hinckley surname became infamous. This created a PR nightmare for ABC. Viewers quickly noticed the unfortunate coincidence. The network feared the name might seem insensitive, so they acted fast. They changed the character's name to Ralph Hanley mid-season. Sometimes they used another awkward solution. Characters avoided saying Hinckley out loud. They called him Mr. H instead. Some lines were redubbed so quickly you could blink and miss it. Eventually, the controversy faded. The show quietly brought back the Hinckley name. But that strange chapter left a patchwork of continuity in some episodes. 7. Robert Culp contributed more than just acting. Robert Culp, famous for his role in I Spy, joined the cast as FBI agent Bill Maxwell. At first, the producers wanted him to direct the pilot, but scheduling conflicts got in the way. There were also creative uncertainties, so that plan was dropped. Still, Culp's role went far beyond just acting. He often suggested script changes. He gave input on camera angles and comedic moments. Co-stars joked that Culp was the other director. He would stand behind the camera. He'd talk to the actual director about how to shoot scenes. He'd also chat with Stephen J. Cannell. They discussed how Bill Maxwell should throw a punch or give an order. That behind-the-scenes energy made the show better. Culp's comedic timing fit perfectly with William Katt's awkward charm. Together, they created a strong on-screen partnership. That dynamic helped anchor the entire series. 8. Connie Sellecca's role expanded. Thanks to positive feedback, Connie Sellecca joined the cast as Pam Davidson. Pam was an attorney. She quickly got pulled into the supersuit's wild adventures. In the original outline, her role was small. She was only meant to appear in a few scenes. But test audiences loved her. They responded to her wit, her intelligence, and her emotional grounding. She gave the show a rational voice. She balanced out the chaos of Ralph and Bill. Because of that, her role grew. Many episodes began to center around her. She often had to bail the two heroes out, legally or personally. Connie Sellecca also surprised viewers. She showed a sly sense of humor. Her earlier roles had been more dramatic, but here she shined in comedic scenes. She teased Ralph for his clumsy landings. She rolled her eyes when Bill tried to act like the tough agent. Audiences admired Pam's balance. She chased her own ambitions, but she was always ready to help. That gave the show a triple threat dynamic. The superhero costume was unbearably hot and uncomfortable. The bright red supersuit looked fun on screen, but in reality it was a sweaty nightmare. The suit was made from synthetic fabric. It trapped heat under the studio lights. William Katt often ended up drenched after filming. He joked about it. On hot days, he could lose a pound or two in water weight. Sometimes he had to wring out the suit between scenes. Meanwhile, the costume team had a tough job. They had to keep the suit looking fresh. No sweat stains could show on camera. There was also some comedic irony. The longer Katt wore the hot suit, the worse Ralph's flying looked. As the series went on, the team tried new fabrics, but Katt never fully escaped the sauna-like conditions. 10. Flying scenes achieved with wire work and green screen. Pulling off flight scenes in the early 1980s was a huge challenge. There was no refined CGI. There were no advanced rigging systems like we have today. The crew had to get creative. They used wire stunts and green screen composites. William Katt was strapped into a harness. He dangled in front of a giant projection screen. He had to mimic flying. At the same time, he tried not to show the strain from the cables. Shots of him zooming over cities or deserts took serious effort. They required hours of careful camera alignment. Sometimes just a few seconds of flight took an entire day to film, but the result was worth it. Ralph flailed in midair. He never looked fully in control. Fans loved that. It felt different from the smooth, polished flights of Superman. It had a homemade, comedic charm. That became part of the show's identity. 11. Katt's curly hair was a nightmare for the makeup team. William Katt's curly blonde hair caused a small production headache. At first, the team wanted the cowl to cover his entire head, but Katt's curls had other ideas. They kept popping out around his temples. Stylists tried everything. They tucked the curls in. They used hair products to flatten them. They combed them back carefully. But it didn't work. Once Katt started jumping, sweating, or crashing, the curls escaped. Eventually, the team gave up fighting it. They embraced the ringlets instead. His wild curls became part of Ralph's image. A hero with golden curls sticking out of a bright red suit. It fit the character perfectly. Ralph never looked fully in control of his powers or his hair. 12. Comedic falls were carefully choreographed. The comedic crash landings needed a top-notch stunt team. Dennis Danger Matalone was the lead stunt coordinator. He rose to the challenge. He came up with wild ways for Katt, or his double, to crash. They tumbled through windows. They rolled across car hoods. They bounced off walls. Matalone believed in one rule: the more ridiculous, the better. That matched the show's comedic tone. If Ralph flew gracefully, it wouldn't be as funny. What made him lovable was the crash. He'd faceplant, pop up with a sheepish grin, and shrug. That's what audiences loved. Over time, the team perfected a formula. First, a triumphant takeoff. Then, a quick moment of confidence. Hey, I can do this. And finally, a total crash on landing. Matalone made sure each crash was different. One week, Ralph might skid into a carnival booth. The next, he might flip over a fence. Every meltdown had its own flair. 13. Creative clashes with ABC over the show's tone. The comedic approach didn't sit well with ABC at first. The network had a different vision. They wanted a serious crime fighter, like in 1970s cop dramas. Or they wanted a cartoonish hero just for kids. Stephen J. Cannell had another idea. He took a gamble on something in the middle. He aimed for comedy that families could watch together. He believed people wanted fantasy, but they also wanted relatable everyday moments. Early reviews were mixed. Some critics didn't get the tone. Was it a farce, or was it a real superhero story? That confusion turned out to be a strength. Viewers liked the blurred line, they enjoyed the silly moments, but they also felt the heart behind the humor. Over time, ABC changed its mind. Ratings showed that the show had broad appeal. Kids laughed at the crashes, teens liked the action, parents appreciated the warmth, everyone found something to enjoy. 14. Ralph and Pam's romance was kept ambiguous to build suspense. The romance between Ralph and Pam was hinted at from the start. Writers considered pairing them up early, but they hesitated. They worried that resolving the tension too soon would kill the comedy. So they took their time. In one episode, they'd nearly kiss. In another, a date might go wrong. Usually, Ralph had to leave suddenly to stop a burglary or chase a thief. Pam often felt frustrated by his unpredictability. That will-they-won't-they vibe became a fan favorite. Even now, viewers still debate it. Some think the show needed more romance. Others believe the slow-burn tension kept things interesting. Connie Sellecca enjoyed those scenes. She liked playing a woman juggling her legal career while dealing with a boyfriend in a supersuit. That mix of the ordinary and the absurd made their relationship stand out. 15. Robert Culp improvised brilliant comedic lines. Robert Culp's ad-libs made Bill Maxwell unforgettable. Culp was known for his quick wit. He often improvised one-liners on set. He'd call Ralph Kid or the clown in the red jammies. Writers gave a rough outline for scenes, but they often left the banter to Culp and Katt. Their chemistry took off. Bill's jaded, tough guy FBI style clashed with Ralph's kind, nervous teacher vibe. That contrast worked. They'd argue over how to handle crises. Should they sneak in and gather intel? Or should Ralph just fly in and crash through the roof? Those moments became comedy gold. Culp's improv also helped Katt. It let him react naturally, in the moment. That spontaneity made scenes feel fresh and alive. The humor never felt forced. It felt real, because much of it was. 16. Difficult to release internationally due to genre confusion, international networks had trouble figuring out how to market the show. Some added more obvious comedy in the dubbing. They made Ralph seem even more like a buffoon. Others delayed the release. They weren't sure if local audiences would connect with the concept. A hero who crashes when flying and only solves small crimes seemed risky. Some countries even changed the title. They made it more literal. Names like the red-suited teacher or the flying klutz appeared. But over time, the show found its audience. Its unique charm won people over around the world. The theme song became a hit overseas, too. In parts of Europe, Believe It or Not climbed the charts. Even when broadcast with English lyrics and no subtitles, it worked. Cultural differences didn't matter. People related to the idea. An ordinary person struggling with extraordinary powers felt universal. The early marketing confusion didn't stop the show's global success. 17. The suit had limitless powers. Even though Ralph's mishaps got most of the attention, the suit was incredibly powerful. In the show's canon, its abilities were almost limitless. We saw hints of many powers: super strength, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, mind reading, invisibility, basically whatever the plot needed. That gave writers endless comedic options. They could drop Ralph into all kinds of wild situations. In one episode, he turns invisible during class. He has to calm down panicked students while they can't see him. In another, he lifts a car right in front of Bill. Bill can only stare in shock. But here's the twist. Ralph never got instructions. He didn't know how to control the powers. Each new ability showed up under pressure. That made every moment more chaotic and more funny. 18 DC Comics considered filing a copyright lawsuit. Rumors once swirled about a possible lawsuit from DC Comics. They believed the show's red-suited, curly-haired hero was too similar to Superman. Both characters could fly. Both wore bright capes. It felt a little too close, but Cannell's team pushed back. They argued that Ralph was the opposite of Superman. Superman was polished and confident. Ralph was clumsy and unsure. His powers caused problems as often as they solved them. He didn't radiate strength. He tripped over it. For a while, fans followed the story in the press. There were cryptic hints about private negotiations, but no public lawsuit ever happened. Most likely, the comedic tone saved the show. It was different enough to avoid a legal fight. 19. Outdoor scenes often caused traffic disruptions. Much of the show was filmed around Los Angeles. Some days, William Katt had to shoot scenes in full costume. He'd be suspended from wires, wearing the red supersuit. Sometimes this happened near busy intersections. Drivers weren't prepared. They slammed their brakes to stare at the flying man. L.A. traffic came to a stop. People tried to figure out what was happening. Was it a movie stunt or some kind of publicity prank? The chaos often slowed filming. One story stood out. A police officer showed up to deal with the traffic jam. At first, he had no idea what was going on. Then he recognized the setup. It was That Red Suit show. Instead of shutting it down, he helped. He blocked traffic so they could finish the scene. The real-life reactions added a fun, spontaneous energy. People seeing a superhero above them made the set feel like part of a comedy in motion. 20. Stephen J. Cannell made a cameo in one episode. Stephen J. Cannell loved making cameo appearances. He liked stepping in front of the camera from time to time. In one episode, he played a TV producer. The character annoyed Ralph with a silly publicity scheme. Crew members remembered the moment well. Cannell nailed his lines on the first take. Afterward, he joked about it. He said he might have missed his true calling as an actor. Of course, his real talent was behind the scenes. Writing and producing kept him more than busy. But the cameos were fun. They let him tip his hat to the audience. They reminded viewers that the show didn't take itself too seriously. It knew it was a comedy. After filming that cameo, Cannell joked with William Katt. He said, "Now, if this writing gig dries up, maybe I can join you in the land of spandex." 21. Daily, behind-the-scenes bloopers were a regular occurrence. Day-to-day filming usually ended with some funny bloopers. William Katt often struggled with takeoffs. His launches looked more like mid-air stumbles. He would jump off a mini trampoline. The goal was to hit the wire at the right moment. The wire would then yank him upward. But sometimes the timing was off. The result? Katt would face-plant on the mats, again and again. Blooper reels caught all of it. Meanwhile, costumers rushed in. They had to fix his wrinkled suit. They also had to recurl any strands of hair that fell flat. Katt laughed about it. He once said he felt like a seagull with a broken wing, just flapping. But those messy takeoffs worked. They helped sell the comedy on screen. Each shaky launch told the audience, yes, this is a heroic flight, but don't expect a smooth landing. 22. Connie Sellecca learned comedy skills from the show. For Connie Sellecca, the greatest American hero opened new doors. Before playing Pam Davidson, she was known for dramatic or romantic roles. Those roles often required elegance and seriousness. But this show was different. Here, she got to explore comedy. She learned how to deliver punchy lines. She bantered with Bill. She threw exasperated barbs at Ralph. Audiences loved it. They appreciated Pam's quick thinking and sharp comebacks, especially in the middle of all the chaos. Sellecca later reflected on the experience. She said the show taught her comedic timing. She called it a master class in delivering zingers. That was thanks to Cannell's writing and Culp's improvisation. The role boosted her profile. It proved she could handle humor just as well as serious drama. The show tackled real social issues: education, politics, law. Though often known for its slapstick humor, the show also addressed real issues. Ralph's job as a high school teacher opened the door for social commentary. Episodes touched on underfunded schools. They explored juvenile delinquency. They showed the emotional toll of caring for disadvantaged students. Bill Maxwell, as an FBI agent, brought a different angle. His storylines highlighted government red tape and secrecy. Pam's work as a lawyer added more depth. Her cases sometimes dealt with corporate corruption. She also encountered systemic inequality. These subplots were never the main focus, but they added layers to the comedy. Cannell believed in this balance. He thought viewers appreciated subtle reminders of life's complexity. Even as Ralph flew over rooftops, real-world problems were still part of the story. It made the show feel grounded, and it spoke to early 1980s audiences navigating political and social change. 24th, Katt performed many of his own minor stunts. William Katt did many of his own minor stunts. He handled low jumps and comedic pratfalls himself. He believed it added authenticity. Staying in character helped sell Ralph's awkward landings. But there was a price. Katt collected bruises, scrapes, and sore muscles. Over time, it added up. Eventually, the producers stepped in. They insisted the stunt team take over the bigger crashes. Still, Katt pushed to keep doing the smaller stunts. He said it helped with comedic timing. If a stunt double did everything, the spontaneity might disappear. Katt wanted the falls to feel natural and funny. By the end of 3 seasons, he practically lived on crash mats. Just like Ralph, he took the hits. The bumps and bruises were real. 25. Robert Culp got lost. Driving to lunch with his co-stars. One favorite behind-the-scenes memory involved Robert Culp's sense of direction. He often offered to drive castmates to lunch. He'd proudly say that Bill Maxwell wouldn't waste time in traffic. But in real life, Culp often got lost, sometimes even near the studio. The cast teased him constantly. They joked that if Bill Maxwell had to track criminals, he'd be in trouble if they were near confusing intersections. William Katt remembered one moment clearly. Culp circled the same block 3 times. He got frustrated and blamed the city's layout. Meanwhile, Connie Sellecca sat beside him, giggling the whole time. That kind of off-screen comedy bonded the cast. Their real-life chemistry naturally spilled into their on-screen performances. It helped make the show feel easy, fun, and full of heart. 26 ABC's constant time slot changes, confused viewers' network interference caused major problems for the show. A BC kept shifting its time slot. Sometimes they moved it to a different evening with little promotion. Fans tuned in at the usual time, only to find a different program. This confused viewers. Ratings dropped as a result. Stephen J. Cannell wasn't happy. He openly criticized the network for ruining the show's momentum. It was a familiar story in TV history, a cult favorite show with loyal fans, struggling to keep an audience. Every new time slot meant more work to promote the show again. Even though people loved Believe It or Not, casual viewers got lost. Many missed episodes simply because they couldn't find them. Over time, this hurt the show. The constant schedule changes chipped away at its success. That's part of why it had a shorter run, despite how beloved it was. 27. Merchandise released. T-shirts, lunchboxes, toys, and more. The success of Believe It or Not sparked a small merchandising boom. Fans could buy lunchboxes with Ralph Hinckley mid-crash. T-shirts featured the show's alien emblem. There were even rumors of a sugary cereal tie-in. Cannell's team saw the potential. They wanted to market the show as a fun, comedic twist on superheroes. The cereal didn't go far. It never reached stores beyond a few test markets. But some fans still got their hands on the other merch. T-shirts and lunchboxes became collector's items. They represent a quirky piece of 1980s pop culture. Decades later, these items still pop up online. Auction sites list them for surprisingly high prices. Collectors, still humming the theme song, are happy to pay. 28. Multiple failed attempts to reboot or make a movie. Stephen J. Cannell made several attempts to bring the show back. He wanted to resurrect The Greatest American Hero as a movie or modern reboot. Scripts floated around Hollywood. Each one tried to capture the original's underdog charm, but they also aimed to update the story for new audiences. Studios were hesitant. They weren't sure younger viewers would get it. Today's superhero fans are used to sleek, high-budget action. A hero built on comedic failure might not land the same way. There was another concern, too. Changing a cult classic could upset longtime fans. People loved the low-tech charm of the original. They didn't want it overpolished or fixed. From time to time, reboot rumors still pop up. Ideas included a female-led version. Some talked about cameos from William Katt. But none of these efforts have succeeded. For now, the show remains a piece of pure 80s nostalgia, untouched and fondly remembered. 29. Final season tried. Expanding the universe with a new hero. In the final season, the show faced falling ratings. ABC looked for ways to shake things up. They considered adding a bigger, ongoing plot. One idea involved the suit's alien origins. Another teased a cosmic storyline. At the same time, William Katt wanted fresh material. He suggested new directions for Ralph. Some episodes could show him mentoring other heroes. Others might explore deeper moral questions. Cannell worked on these ideas. He even hinted that Ralph might not be the only one with a suit. But things didn't come together. Scheduling issues piled up. The show's comedic style clashed with rising prime-time competition. In 1983, ABC pulled the plug. Fans were disappointed. The ending felt abrupt. Many questions were left unanswered. What were the suit's full powers? Was Ralph truly alone as a hero? And what would have happened with his relationship with Pam? The show ended, but the curiosity lived on. 30. The 1986 episode, The Greatest American Heroine, never became a series. In 1986, a new pilot tried to continue the story. It was called The Greatest American Heroine. This time, Ralph passed the supersuit to someone new. The successor was an ordinary woman. She was meant to carry on his comedic, well-meaning version of heroism. William Katt returned for a cameo. He played a mentor. By then, Ralph had grown enough to understand the suit's larger purpose. But the pilot didn't lead to a full series. Network priorities had shifted. Executives likely feared the original magic couldn't be repeated. Years later, fans found the pilot on certain DVD releases. It gave them a glimpse of what might have been. Even though that version never took off, the original series lives on. It remains a beloved cult classic. Fans still attend conventions to meet the cast. They praise the show's humor, heart, and sense of wonder. The optimism of The Greatest American Hero continues to inspire. As you replay these 30 behind-the-scenes nuggets in your mind, the charm of The Greatest American Hero becomes clear. It's the story of an ordinary man, teacher by day, reluctant superhero by night, learning to fly without a manual, defying network pigeonholes, and juggling cosmic responsibilities with lesson plans. While controversies about name changes, possible copyright lawsuits, or scheduling fiascos occasionally overshadowed it, the heart of the show always centered on an everyman's comedic missteps. Ralph's superpowers never overshadowed his basic decency. Bill Maxwell's gruff cynicism never fully dampened his grudging admiration, and Pam Davidson's legal acumen never left her too jaded to lend a supportive hand. Heroism isn't about flawless feats or impeccable landings. It's about the willingness to try, fail, and keep going anyway. In an era stuffed with slick superhero narratives, sometimes the most disarming hero is the one who can't quite figure out how to corner without smashing into a dumpster. That underdog vibe fosters a sense of community among fans who see bits of themselves in Ralph's comedic sincerity. Whether you're discovering the show for the first time or revisiting it decades later, that iconic theme song still calls out, "Believe it or not, I'm walking on air." And for just a moment, it's easy to imagine ourselves in that bright red suit, grappling with flight harnesses and fumbling with hidden powers, laughing all the while because deep down, we know that being heroic often starts with being a little bit foolish.